Hey guys, welcome. Hello. Glad to see you guys here. It's been just a tad since I have done one of these. So we're going to hopefully pick back up on another weekly schedule of every Wednesday at the same time. So yeah, seems like a good thing to try and keep going. Welcome. Yes, Role Creator 3 looks so satisfying. And we can only hope that it gets much better. So, the goal today that I was wanting to share with you guys real quick was showing the benefits to the biome system in terms of just pure sculpting. Um, I was asked before how relevant the biome system is outside of masking and and texturing and adding filters and whatnot, but purely using the biome system in terms of just shaping the terrain, trying to manipulate it to your advantage. And I covered this a little bit, I think, in the last stream I did on Glacier National Park, but I'm going to try and implement that a little bit more detailed here in the in this stream where I'm going to make a monument, one of those monument structures from Monument Valley. So we know that biomes over here. Let's go to our biome tab. So we know that we can add multiple biomes, and we already know that eventually we're going to be able to paint in our own masks for these biomes. And in each biome, we can say that we're going to apply certain filters, certain textures, and mask out the area. But the same strategy can be used for just sculpting by using different subdivisions per biome. So, for example, let's go to, well, what we're going to be trying to implement in this piece is one of these monument structures here in Monument Valley. Specifically, if we go to Google Maps, we can see the entire valley here, and we're going to try and re implement an idea for Mitchell Butte here. So, we're going to capture a height map of this in just a little bit, but let me go back into Worker 3 and showcase this just pure raw, sculpting it at first. So to kick this off, let's go to the custom base shape icon and click create. So we can see it subdivided it into like one subdivision. And I'd like to also add that the plus and minus subdivision buttons here, I believe there was discussion that we're going to have some sort of text here to let you know the exact subdivision counter. Because right now I have, without sitting here and counting each one of these squares, I have no idea like how many times this is being subdivided. I'm assuming this right here is being subdivided 32 by 32, if I had a guess. But the more we increase it or decrease it, there should be a number here that's going to tell us, the mesh number in X and Y axis. So that's going to be really handy because then we can judge that based on whenever exporting comes. Say we want to export based off a mesh that's, 512 by 512 or 64 by 64. We can at least, make the terrain based off those subdivisions if we wanted to and export it at those different levels. So that's just something real quick that's going to be coming hopefully in the next one of the next updates. No promises there. So let's go ahead and click flatten so that we can start with the base terrain and go back to the default for the divisions. Yes. Yeah, typically you would want to you flatten the terrain first before you sculpt something custom unless you find that your biome seed here you like quite well. If you like the shape of the what the generator has done for you, then by all means have at it and roll with it. So let's say we want to create the what we want to do here is kind of create the slope flat area here first. So assuming that what we're going to be using is this as a stamp. So you create this monument in this piece and you're going to use the entire thing as a stamp somewhere else in some other program. So what I want to do is instead of making the outer bounds of this terrain completely flat, we want to make sure that there is just an ever so slight mound to it. So from the corner to the center, there's just an ever so slight increase in elevation, just so that whenever if we were to add things like erosion and whatnot, it's not gonna the filter is not gonna act real funky with a flat terrain off coming off of a really sharp terrain. So let's make this circle really big. Uh, Actually, let's click and then hold shift to and scroll on the mouse wheel to change the feathering. And I'm just going to come up about 9 meters. Let's take the circle a little smaller this time. Click here and increase it again. We're just going to keep doing this ever so slightly so that we can have a slight taper. So it's not perfect. I'm just trying to make sure that there's at least some content to work with, because if you were to put this, like say if we were to export this mesh into something like Blender or Unreal Engine with the edges of the terrain kind of sloped under the terrain that you're putting it into, if this were a mesh, it would help blend it in a little bit better. All right, so say in this case we were to start creating that slope. You can see that my mesh is subdivided in quite a large area. So we're going to try and create that slope in the beginning, or at the in the Monument Valley. So just a slight slope of recreating. You can see here the slope just around the cliff. Just a little something for it to grab hold to. And then let's get an even smaller, a slightly smaller one with no blending. And I messed that up because I didn't hold shift. All right. So hold shift, no blending, make sure it's real sharp, and just drag it straight up. That way we can get a nice, uh, really sharp cliff edge. And here, even then we can lower our circle, start manipulating these areas up a little bit more if you wanted to. Adding a little bit of bumpiness to the tops of the cliff face. So you kind of get the idea of shaping it in this manner. So what I'm doing here is basically just creating the bulk of the shape. So using the very first biome to create the main shape to the structure. So then what we can do is add a second biome, and you see it got all messed up, but let's go ahead and click on the main biome tab here. And for our operation, let's make sure that it's set to add, because then that's going to say that the child biome here is not going to overwrite anything of the parent biome. It's just going to add to it. But you can see that the terrain is a little funky because the generator is, displaying a certain shape for each and every biome individually. So let's go over to the custom base shape tab for the second biome, click create. And then if we were to flatten the generation for this biome, it's going to look just like it was from the first biome, because it's flattening out this particular biome and it's inheriting everything from the first biome, the blue biome. So what we can do for the second biome, we see that the subdivisions are the same, but what I encourage you to do is increase the subdivisions just a couple notches. And then this is going to let the child biome act as another step level for editing and sculpting. So the first biome, you can see the subdivisions are quite large for the larger shape. And the second child biome here, you can see the subdivisions are a little bit denser, so that we can go in here. Say we want to carve something out of this, we can carve even much finer adjustments straight off of the large structure that we made from the first biome. And we can even do, if we wanted to make a little stream of some kind out here, start carving away at much finer detail. And then if you realize that you need to go back to change the bulk detail, we're back here in the first biome, and I want to raise this up again. We can even come around and start working on some sort of terraced effect. So the whole goal of having multiple biomes for uh, shaping the terrain is solely for the purpose of being able to have more levels of adjustment, more levels of details. Kind of think of it kind of like sculpting away at clay or stone. You're going to carve away, the large chunks or add large chunks of the model that you're, sculpting first, and then you'll come in later with finer, detailed sculpting tools and start carving away, the fine grained details. That's seemingly what we're doing here, and it's good practice to do it that way. Do the large details to get the shape, and then do another biome so that you can sculpt the smaller details. So here in the second biome, I can easily, if I wanted to make this cliff even sharper, we could say go to this stretch here and then select align. So we want to hold shift to align these as best as possible to the top. Now it's not perfect as you would imagine it would be. It's still trying to do some blending effects between the first biome and the second biome, but we're able to easily. Now, if we were to select these squares here and lower it, we can see that we're seemingly stretching this grid even further. So now this is becoming way more vertical than the rest of the mesh. So being able to see the grid is quite handy too. You can see this cliff face is almost perfectly straight up and down. So that's one way that you can easily create a 90-degree vertice, or as best as possible, is just to go based off of the grid segments here of your subdivisions. So let's make this one a little bit sharper. Now don't go too low because then you'll create a cavity at the bottom of our cliff here. So just go down low enough so that's a smooth gradient, and then resample. And just keep sculpting away till those meshes, to those division meshes, are a bit more steeper. All right, and usually what I like to do is add one more biome after this, so a third biome. Now with the biomes, make sure that you with sculpting, if you're wanting to sculpt, a structure like this of different layers, as long as you're wanting to, make sure that it's all on one biome, don't set the second biome as a second child from the main biome like we have here, because then you can see here with the masking, we've got the green biome is cutting through and the yellow biome is cutting through separately. We just want to use the biomes as independent pieces for sculpting. So make sure that the third sculpt is the third child is a subset of the second child, or I should say the first child. So the orange here is the first child and the green here is the second child. So make sure that the last biome is a subset of the second biome, and so on and so forth. And then set the third biome to add. And then let's turn off this masking feature. And then as well, go to the create custom base shape for this, set it to flatten, and then we can subdivide it even finer so that if we wanted to zoom in to these really intimate areas here, we can then carve away just like we would in something like ZBrush. This isn't quite as intuitive as ZBrush's painting features, but you get the idea. So you can carve away even smaller amounts of details. We can do these little chiseled effects, and say we didn't like that. Let's go back to the first biome, and I want this peak to be raised up even more. So part of what you sculpted in the second and third biomes will come with the first biome, but you can see the parent is stretching those meshes of the second and third biomes even more. So if we were to, let's say, increase this up to here, then on the second biome, we may have to come in and repolish a little bit if we wanted to. And on the third biome, let's say we wanted all of this to come down a little bit, perhaps align with this area. Maybe there's a cut in the side of the cliff face here. So you guys get the idea of what I'm trying to say here, of using the biome system as purely sculpting levels of detail. I hope that makes sense to you guys, because I had a couple questions on trying to understand that, and that's how I like to do it. At least now, is to add different characters, different shapes and voids to these uh, different elements, especially in this monument here. Maybe we have a really sharp high piece here. So this is a bunch of just custom sculpting to try and get the effect that you're after, whatever your design is. Great. So then we can easily, for all of these biomes, it would be a good idea if you wanted to click inherit filters for each of the child biomes. That way, whenever you add filters at different segments, if you wanted to, or just do it on the parent filter, then each of these subsequent biomes will inherit the filters of the first biome. So when it comes to filters or texturing this piece, it really comes down to how you're wanting to segregate these areas. So you see that we use the green, the orange, and the teal biome here just purely as sculpting, but you can also use them for different texturing and filters effects as well. But remember, we're just use these two biomes for pure sculpting detail. Let's add another biome here and add this biome as none. So this biome will be a different child biome, but if we were to add another biome and add this as none. So these two biomes here are also child biomes, but they don't have any effect on the detail from the first two. Well, they shouldn't, because now, oh, I see what I did. All right. So seemingly, if you didn't create anything from the first biome, these two biomes could act as pure painting. Now it looks like you dropped your ice cream bucket, picked up the bucket, and the ice cream stands on the floor. Yep, that's one way you could do it. If you had a chocolate, say you had a chocolate ice cream bucket, dump it upside down, scan it with some pictures, and then you can have a scanned terrain based off an upside down ice cream bucket. So seemingly what these two biomes could act like is just pure painting biomes only. So we could later, for this pink biome, just paint in where we want a certain texture, or this biome paint in a certain mask for a texture. Right now it's go ahead and adding these masks for us, which is kind of messing up with our terrain generation. So if we were to have this one be flattened and this one be flattened, presumably it wouldn't harm much to our biome system here. Get that out of here. So these two biomes, again, we used primarily for sculpting, and these last biomes we can use primarily whenever we decide to hand paint. Whenever we get hand painting masking available, we can mask in where we want certain textures to be if we wanted to. Good morning. Good to see you, Pixel Monkey. Yes, hopefully, I know they're working on trying to get the some new licensing things figured out, I believe, with Octane on the portal. but I'm not quite sure where they're at in the process. I know they're planning to have something come out this month. No, this is not Unity based anymore. This World Creator 3 is 100% their own code, their own shaders, their own engine. They they decided for World Creator 3 that they were going to try and step away from the tethered nature of trying to code something from within another program. They didn't want to do it within Unity. They didn't want to do it within Unreal, even though both those programs would be really good at making other programs. But there's when you do that, there becomes a certain yeah, it's a really smart decision in the long run because now they don't have to, if Unity would were to make an update, there's no dependency on what those updates are, and sometimes depending on what Unity updates could screw over World Creator 2, which kind of happened to them a couple times. Unity's updates and World Creator 2's updates kind of had to go hand in hand, and we saw a lot of issues with that. So um yeah, and they had to yeah, and plus they had to pay for the licenses, I'm sure, to Unity. So this is, since they're good at coding, they decided early on with World Creator 3 that they were just going to stick to what they know best and allow themselves the chance to try this for themselves. And I think, based on what they did a pretty darn good job. I mean, you couldn't ask for more, even the graphic fidelity of this. And they've got a lot of work ahead, especially with filters. I mean, this filter list here isn't that long. There's plenty more filters that they have to add, some of which I wish we had for this example. Like we could add terrace, but it would be really nice if we can have a nicer version of terraced eroded. Terraced can create some really sharp. If we were to increase the size here, and we can terrace will add some really sharp details, and terraced eroded is quite nice, but it doesn't allow the rocks versus water erosion to do a whole lot from what you want. So that's just some areas to think about. Quick question: is there any way to show your keystrokes on the screen? I know some gamers have some plugins that show keyboard and mouse interaction. It would be helpful for people to quickly learn key commands and all that stuff. Ah, I see. So, um, yeah, I haven't looked into that any for doing World Critter. That would actually be a really good idea. Usually, whenever I try my best whenever I do things like come in here. Let's go to this one. I usually try my best to say what I'm doing. So I'm clicking and holding on the mouse button. I'm holding down on shift to activate the painting mode, scrolling on the mouse wheel to change the feathering effect, and moving my mouse up and down to, do the operation. So yeah, I totally agree. It would be really nice to have somewhere like in the bottom left over here of what I'm doing. So I'll look into that plugin. Oh, there is input overlay. Aha. Okay. I'll thank you for linking that. I'll definitely look into this, and maybe that's something we can add because I know, yeah, you're right. Being able to see the keystrokes or key commands would be really helpful. So thank you for bringing that up. I will definitely try to implement something like that before next Wednesday, which is when we'll be doing our next stream. So yeah, quick run through for all the custom base shapes. Everything is either shift or control, middle mouse button, or yeah, you save a lot of times on your words. Yeah, I know. I could definitely do that to save a lot of speaking time. um Another quick thing I wanted to point as between the different subdivisions here. So we talked about the different subdivisions being able, or different biomes with different subdivisions, allowing you to have different levels of detail of control. But one thing to remember is the smoothness and sharpness of the different subdivisions. So with a wide subdivision like this, just go over here, for example, and click this and drag up. You see it's got a certain um, sort of grabbiness to it, as I would say. We go to the next level and we go up, you can see it's got another level of grabbiness. But what I'm trying to get to is the smooth factor. So if we were to scroll on the mouse wheel, let's take this back down. If we were to scroll on the mouse wheel, we can change the feathering, of course. Actually, just lower this. All right. So the feathering also makes a big deal with the amount of subdivisions. So the more feathering you have, the smoother it's going to be, obviously. So each subdivision, if we smooth out really wide like this, you can see that it's the level of increase and decreasing here is more gradual. And as we decrease the blend, it'll become more sharper. But with the higher subdivisions like this, that feathering is going to be way more smooth. So it's not, you see how smooth this is, as opposed to if we went to the second biome, grabbed this and lowered my feather and tried to smooth this out. So with the higher subdivision, you're fading on your, how you smooth in your brush is going to feather off in a much more tapered, smoothed effect. That's because you have more subdivisions and meshes to work with. One thing I was struggling with was a non-continuous selection set. So clicking on two non-connected squares to do an effect on. Okay. Let's come over here and showcase that. So a non-continuous painting effect. So that's also where having the key commands to show you would work. Maybe I can even post a permanent thing here on screen to show that too, as well with what I'm pressing. That would be that'd be really handy for me to post somewhere on this side as the key commands. And I'll also maybe make a document for the key commands in on the Patreon page for free for everyone as well. But all right, so say you make this selection and you want to make a selection over here, but if you click, it removes it. But you're saying you want to know how to do this, right? Is this the motion that you are basically wanting to figure out, was being able to add multiple selection points? To do that, you hold control. So if I wanted to keep adding to this selection, I'm constantly holding control and I'm letting off and on the mouse button. So then, now that we have our selection, we hold shift to engage the operation that we're wanting to do. And we can raise or lower all of these at the same time. And as well, if you were to feather this by scrolling up and down the mouse wheel, it'll feather all of your little islands here independently. So then if you want to, it's a really good way to create some hills, some really interesting hills. So the painting in World Creator 3, well, I wouldn't really call this is kind of like painting, but it's not solely like using a paintbrush. It's pretty close. Is quite staggering compared to World Creator 2. World Creator 2 is just nothing in compared to this. So I'm just constantly holding control here. Maybe adding some cut erosion lines. There we go. Makes a whole new sense. Yes, like a whole new level here. Thanks for showing me. Yeah, you're welcome. And with when it, like I said before, if we were to add textures and filters to this particular selection, say we're wanting like in how we started this beginning of the stream, we just wanted to design this monument butte for stamping purposes later, then really you would only have to add filters and textures to the first biome because these two biomes again are just purely for sculpting. If you add filters in this biome and textures in this biome, it's going to be no different at all from if you were to add them in the first biome because we're inheriting the filters and you're going to inherit the textures as well. So these two biomes are pure sculpt, and we're going to do a whole series on trying to get masking and things like that for different biomes. Once custom painting biomes are in effect, hopefully this month. Once that happens, we're going to have a whole lot more things that we can do in this program. All right. So, yeah, we can just go ahead and add a couple more filters to potentially found that erosion flow did pretty good, but adding a height distribution, you can see the line of it right here. All right. Let's add another one. And we're going to add wherever mountains are. And then we're going to add mountains to cavity, convex. And this sort of gives us a pretty nice representation of, hopefully, this effect a little bit. We could actually add another terrace. Wish we had terraced eroded, but the terrace size be really tiny. Have these super small ones, super small pieces. Let's go ahead and let's go ahead and change our, there we go. This is looking a little better, but now our terraced is just a little bit much. There we go. Yeah, terraced is really strong on the steep part, which is why when you do it, you have to seemingly try and reduce its effects. I don't know which one. Yeah, it's really sharp. So we could probably lower that down to somewhere around 50%. Lower to reduce some of the sharpness of it. We could reduce the overall strength settings, but also reduce the high levels on this level step. Here, I'm not trying to create super big elements. I just want something that the erosion flow could capture off of. Definitely when um, uh, terraced eroded comes in, I'm hoping there's some more setting features that could be added to it, like being able to control where certain rock elements are and things like that. And then whenever it comes to adding the water simulations and water erosions, it'll sort of ignore the rock areas that you select. Maybe that's something like part of the selection process here. If we were to say, I want to select, zooming in and out, it's really sensitive. I want to select these pieces here and these pieces here and these pieces here to signify rock elements that don't move whenever you add erosion. Or I want this cliff here and this cliff to not move when I add erosion. Then that could be hopefully a selection process to go along with things. I just realized that I didn't change my scaling because I like to keep scaling large for this program. So I apologize. So we're going to make it a little easier for you guys to see my UI. There we go. That's a bit better. I usually don't work with the UI this large, but for streams, I totally forgot this time to change it back so that you guys can easily see what I'm doing. All right, so that pretty much covers how um, the understanding is. We've gone over several times about why we use different biomes for pure sculpting reasons. So let's start this over from scratch and say we want to recreate this from height data. What could we do to go about capturing something from the real world? Obviously, height data online for DEM isn't going to capture all of these details as nicely as we want. But say you want to, capture the essence of the base details, and by the base details, I mean the first custom base shape, the first biome here with the larger details. You could at least capture that with downloaded height map details.